sound like your typical soap opera theme song now, does it? But it was the theme song for Dark Shadows. And we have with us Jonathan Frid, who played the 200-year-old vampire Barnabas Colmes on the show. And you've been busy lately, touring the country.
Yes, and I'm beginning to feel like 200.
You mean you weren't 200 when they...
busy lately.
You mean you weren't really 200 years old when they...
No, I was just a young kid back in those days.
It must have been makeup then. And recently you've been touring in a revival of Arsenic and Old Lace.
That's right.
And presenting your one-man show, Fools and Fiends, at various theaters and universities.
So there's a mix of the past, the present, and the future there. And,
yeah.
Well, I was going to say that Fools and Fiends is my present going on into the future, and Arsenic is right now, and Dark Shadows is very much in the present, even though it's the past.
I think it's a parallel time thing you're talking about. It's a parallel time
We did a lot of that on the show.
Donna Wandrey played Roxanne Drew on Dark Shadows, and you've also done other soap operas and over 150 commercials. A lot of people have probably seen or heard you since, but maybe didn't realize it was you.
Oh, I bet they did.
Well, maybe they did, yes.
It's the redhead who sells very clean products. Everything clean for your house.
What are some of those products?
Very clean. I don't think I should favor one above the other, but starting at the floor right to your teeth. Everything.
But nothing higher than that?
No, we're working on that.
No shampoo?
next.
I see. Nothing for the ceiling? Kathryn Leigh Scott played Maggie Evans and Josette on the program, and she's a TV and film actress, also has founded her own publishing company, Pomegranate Press, whose debut project was her best-selling volume, My Scrapbook Memories of Dark Shadows. We're holding it up now. Oh, it's radio, I forgot. But this is a whole scrapbook of memories from the
Dark
television
Shadows,
show.
yes. It was the 20th anniversary last year, and I felt very strongly that we should all have some sort of a souvenir remembrance of those 20 years. But I've got a couple of more books coming out as well.
What will they be?
Well, one is called Lobby Cards, the classic films, and it's about lobby cards, and it's 80 color plates. And then I've got another book called Word of Mouth, which is the only book on the market about voiceovers.
Now, you played a love interest.
Yes.
Did you not? Well, who didn't? It seems like...
A lot of unrequited love on this show.
I played 4 characters on the show, and I think all 4 of them were in love with Barnabas. I played Rachel Drummond and Lady Kitty Hampshire in addition to Josette and Maggie, but they were all smitten with Barnabas.
Which was your favorite character of the ones you played?
Oh, I think probably Josette. Because that was 1795. It was very romantic.
And, of course, I was smitten by Josette, but could never get to first base, you see, so I had my troubles, too.
When you have all those spider webs in the way, I guess it's hard to... Now, Donna Wandrey, you played a composite, didn't you, of different... Your character was a composite of different people?
Yes, this is wonderful. You know, the whole time I was on the show, I never knew what my character was. And the first time I went to one of the Dark Shadows conventions, a young man stood up and said, "It's so wonderful to meet you, and you're made out of everybody Jonathan ever loved." And I thought, I didn't know that. The fans who come to the conventions know more than probably the 3 of us.
Sure. Oh, absolutely.
And probably anyone who was on the show knew. They have incredible memories. And, of course, track the show daily.
Could you explain to us, and to those people who have not seen the show, because there's a generation of people who haven't seen Dark Shadows, why there is this cult following about this soap opera, which ran for 4 years on the ABC network. But what is it about Dark Shadows that has this immense loyalty?
I have a theory I'll put forward. I'm sure we all do. The Dark Shadows came on the air at the same time that Star Trek did. They go into the future. We go mostly into the past. But we tell morality tales based on the great classics. We draw on Henry James, the Bible, and Melville, and I mean, just the very best authors to tell really universal stories.
Well, I think, too, it was Gothic, and it dealt with the world of the supernatural. I guess at the beginning it was a bit more like Daphne du Maurier's Rebecca kind of thing, and then it developed beyond that, and more ghosts, and then of course there came the vampire, then we had werewolves and so forth. So we reached, I always thought that we did far more than any other soap opera in the sense that we reached for the stars with these exotic plots. And not always did we quite make it, but when we did, it was a very, very special show. It was very, very unique.
Oh, yes. I think the ensemble playing, too, had an awful lot to do with it. I think any show that's got a really lasting audience, it's because of the ensemble work. I mean, we worked so well together, and we all played so many different roles.
Yeah. We also reached a lot of kids when soap operas weren't geared toward children at all. And it's funny because Kathryn had written her beautiful book. At the same time, and we didn't know this, I was writing an article about it. Obviously, the 20th anniversary got to all of us. But the people I talked to said that they would run home from school to watch this. And that was very different than watching one of your normal, regular little soap operas.
Oh, I'll tell you, it is interesting. There is no other soap that is playing in reruns after 20 years. I mean, it's playing on PBS stations all over the country.
Well, now it's starting again in New York.
Yes, WNYS.
NYC.
Sorry, WNYC.
And it's coming on the 15th.
It's
September.
Starting again September 15th on
At
WNYC.
prime time, no less. I mean, 8 o'clock at night, twice a week, Wednesdays and Thursdays, Tuesdays and Thursdays.
On a PBS station.
PBS, isn't that something? Well, I think of the show as sort of developing into being a kind of an American folklore classic. It's almost getting into that.
Yeah.
Now, Jonathan, you are a Shakespearean-trained actor. You've done a lot of Shakespeare. Does it ever frustrate you that the success for which you're known most to the American public is certainly not a Shakespearean form of acting, but a soap opera? Is that ever a source of frustration?
Oh, that has nothing to do with it, really. I found that what used to annoy me about Barnabas is I was known, for a guy that was biting all the time, for heaven's sake. And that got to be a little bit of a bore. But however, that's the signature and the signature only of the character. Actually, Barnabas Collins was probably one of the most interesting roles I ever had to play in my life. And in many ways, it equaled some of the roles in Shakespeare in terms of the range of the character. He was everything. Over those 4 years, he was everything from a young, stalwart American hero to the most thick, demented creep. He was vulnerable. He was. The thing about Barnabas that always fascinated me, and I think fascinated the public, is that no matter how good he was or how hard he tried to be good, he was always a potential threat. He was always, even if he wasn't a vampire for a while, or if he sort of retreated from that that potential was always there, and that's what gave the character great dynamism.
Elena, who works with us here at WNBC, used to answer Jonathan's mail. Is that correct?
Yes.
And she was very good at it too. I remember we used to have remember those mailing days. We'd have about fan mail parties, and we'd have about 30 people over in the studio and work on the mail.
You mean you have parties with people who write letters, and you'd get them all together in the studio? And
I learned something too about acting through Elaine and her friends, is that, as Donna was referring to earlier, that they knew the plot better than we did. Oh, yeah. And I learned something about theater in that experience, and that is audiences do a great deal of the acting because they involve themselves. They're passive and they absorb, and they knew they were acting these things more than we were. We were just conveying the author's ideas, as it were.
Dark Shadows, started in June of 1966, went off the air in 1971. For so many years, Dark Shadows really wasn't a part of our lives, even though it was playing in reruns here and there.
Yeah.
It's only been in the last couple of years that there's been this wonderful resurgence of interest.
Why the resurgence lately?
Well, maybe nostalgia.
I think nostalgia for the people who grew up during that time.
Oh, yes. And the fact that they've brought it back on all of these PBS stations, and it's been so popular.
Why did it go off the air? I mean, there have been all kinds of theories expounded. Do you have theories as to why? I mean, it wasn't lack of audience?
I think, well, one of the things was very practical. It was always over budget.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, we're all these exotic. You see, soaps, by the way, nowadays, they're all broken up. They're done like movies. In those days, until Dark Shadows came along, they were done, like a play from the beginning to end, and Dark Shadows was meant to be that way. But, however, with all these ghosts, meant chroma key and all these technical effects, we'd have to stop tape And I remember the news department was always, at ABC, was furious at us because we always tied up their equipment long after we were supposed to, into 5 or 6 o'clock at night sometimes. But anyway, there was that too that they didn't like. But it was always over budget. Dan Curtis was a great spender, as he apparently is doing in great style.
Well, why didn't they just move you to prime time where they could have given you a prime time budget?
You know, I wish they had. I think this show actually would have worked in prime time back then.
Well, certainly if, you know, Dynasty and all the other nighttime soaps worked so well.
Oh, yeah.
Dark Shadows could probably still work in prime time if you...
As a
Well,
bonus.
WNYC is going to have it on prime time, so we'll find out how it works.
That debuts on September 15th, and
At
the
8
5th
o'clock.
annual Dark Shadows Festival will be taking place August 28th to the 30th. That's this weekend at the Hilton Gateway Hotel in Newark, New Jersey.